Hello and welcome to this new podcast at Southwark Cathedral. This podcast is picking up on our theme this year of literacy. And quite often when we talk about literacy, we are understandably talking about young people. But today we are going to explore the literacy of adults. And I'm going to be talking in this podcast to two people. Someone very well known to you, I expect, Jeremy Bowen, who is the international editor of BBC News. Jeremy is a big supporter of a charity called Read Easy Southwark. And I begin by talking to him about why he's associated with that charity and why he feels it's important. After I've spoken to Jeremy, I will then speak to Simon Sheppard, who is the team leader for Read Easy Southwark. And Simon will tell us exactly what Read Easy Southwark is, what it's doing, and how we might be able to help. So to begin with, here is my conversation with Jeremy Bowen. Jeremy, hello, and thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's delightful to be with you.
I know that you're a great supporter of Read Easy, and I just wondered if you can tell us why. Why is it an area that you've found yourself committed to?
Well, I was got into it actually by my partner, Julia Williams, who actually established Read Easy Southwark and handed over the organisation to Simon last year sometime. She has always been somebody who has been very interested and aware of the importance of literacy, and so have I, because, you know, in my life, right from when I was a kid, and I was between the ages of about 8 and 13 or 14, I had asthma. And in those days, back in the 1960s, they said if you had asthma, you had to stay in bed and lie still. So I spent weeks and weeks off school reading books. And that gave me a base and inculcated in me really a love of reading and a conviction that literacy is really important. And so, you know, when Julia pointed out to me that there are, I think, more than 2 million people, adults in the UK, who struggle to read for all kinds of reasons, and that she was getting involved with this organisation, Read Easy, and was going to start a chapter in Southwark, well, I was all for it, because I think, you know, Southwark is a borough which has got enormous contrasts in it, from very privileged people to some very highly disadvantaged people. I would count people who can't read, at least only a bit with a struggle, as being highly disadvantaged. There's so many things they can't do, especially if you're a parent. And if you want to go to the supermarket, how can you tell what kind of yogurt you want? I mean, if you get a medicine, how can you tell how many pills you have to take a day? If you want to have that great experience of reading to your children, you can't do it. They miss out, you miss out. So for myriad different reasons, I think all the stats show as well that if you struggle to read, your life chances are much reduced. Your chances of getting a job that pays enough to support you is harder. Your chances of being unemployed are greater. So it ticks every box, learning to read. And it's a hard thing, because often people haven't been able to read because they've got some problem, you know, not least the various kinds of dyslexia.
And being so close up to the person who was running this, you must have heard quite a lot of stories about the results.
Yeah.
I mean, good news stories that are coming out.
I know there have been cases that people who graduated from the scheme who have been liberated by this, just learning to read. Because I think in this day and age, with digital technology, phones, face recognition software, there are actually more ways around it than was the case even 10 years ago. Imagine the extra confidence people can get if they go from not recognizing words, letters, meanings, to actually being able to read. I'm not talking about reading War and Peace either. I'm talking about getting by. I mean, that's enormous. I mean, by all means, move on to War and Peace, but one thing at a time. And so I think that it's brilliant for people's confidence. It's great for their life chances. It's just such a vital life skill. And I'm enormously pleased to be able to help out Read Easy Southwark, because, you know, apart from the fact that learning to read is really important. I think that having organizations that operate in our borough are as well. I've lived in Southwark for many, many years, decades, most of my adult life, actually. And so I'm a big supporter of what goes on in this, very large, very diverse borough, which has got everything from extreme wealth to massive challenges.
And finally, you talk about war and peace. Nobody knows more about those subjects than you do. The good stories, the good work, the liberation that you're hearing from this work, is that in some way balancing out your view of humanity? You might get another view from all that you're covering.
Despite the fact I've been a foreign correspondent for the BBC for more than 40 years now, and I've been to many places which are going through nightmares, one thing that I've always been conscious of is that actually here in the UK, in the main, we have pretty good lives. Not everybody, by all means, but believe you me, some of the places I have been to, they would just love to have the opportunities that we have here. And of course, you can open so many more opportunities up if you can read. As for human nature, one thing that actually spending many years looking at conflicts and sometimes seeing them up close and personal is I actually have quite a lot of faith in the decency of human beings. I think that people around the world, wherever they come from, tend to want the same things. They want to have quiet lives, peaceful lives, lives where they can fulfill their potential, their opportunities, do their best for their kids, for their wider families, for their aging parents or whatever. And I mean, all the things that people here want to do. We're not different. We're humans. I mean, this is a very, very important thing. It's the one thing I've taken away from that. Now, leadership is another matter. And often leaders bring the peoples of their countries into terrible places. But human beings caught up in all of this, if you stop and talk to them, I think you'll find that they will want many of the same things that people who get on the bus every day in Southwark to go to work want too.
Well, thank you. And we're going to do everything we can here at the Cathedral to support Simon and his team.
More power to you. Congratulations, and thanks for helping out. It's much appreciated.
It was really good to hear of Jeremy's support of Read Easy Southwark and to know that he's lived in the locality for such a long time. We now speak to Simon Sheppard, the team leader at Read Easy Southwark, to discover a little bit more detail about the work of the charity, the work as it affects local people in Southwark, and also at the end, some ideas as to how we might be able to be part of this work if we have some time to offer. So here is my conversation with Simon Sheppard from Read Easy Southwark. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you for inviting me.
It's great that you're here because, of course, this year is the year in which Southwark Cathedral is looking at literacy and the great need for it, the great challenges that are around in this particular area, and which, of course, you and your work know more about than any of us. So we're delighted that you're going to help us learn a little bit more, not only about the situation that you're trying to address, but also about how we might be able to help. But can you just tell us a little bit about you, first of all?
Yeah, so I spent my life as a retailer. I worked for Harrods for 8 years and then the Dollars Partnership for 24. I took redundancy 5 years ago, and I suppose for a while I helped volunteer with the NHS. I did some COVID clinics, if you remember those. But then I found myself with a bit more time on my hands, and I was at the Camberwell Open Gardens Society 2 years ago, actually, and these 3 ladies at a table said to me, did I have a minute of my time to talk to them? And I was like, oh, yes, okay. And transpired they were from Read Easy. They were from Read Easy Southwark. And I had a conversation with them, and, well, here I am today. Yes, and it was all by chance, to be honest.
After some of the best things are.
Yes, indeed.
So Read Easy Southwark is part of something that's national called Read Easy. Perhaps you could just tell us about the national before we come in onto Southwark.
So Read Easy is a relatively young charity. It was set up in 2010 by a lady called Ginny Williams-Ellis, and She witnessed prisoner-to-prisoner coaching for reading going on in prisons using a system called Turning Pages, which is by the Shannon Trust. And she recognised that there was a need for this sort of coaching outside of the prison service. And so she set up Read Easy to do precisely that. And we still use that system to teach our readers. And it is, as you say, a national charity. There are 80 branches around the country. Southwark is just one of those. And yeah, we teach people to read using free, confidential, one-to-one coaching.
And the Southwark branch was founded about 4 years ago?
So 2022, so set up by my predecessor, Julia. So we are relatively new, but there are newer branches still opening or trying to open at the moment. And so we help regularly between 40 and 50 people in Southwark learn to read. We do that in neutral public spaces. So we use the library network quite a lot. We're lucky that in Southwark, the council have invested in libraries over the last decade or so. And so they are a set of nice spaces where people can feel safe to do this. We've also got some local businesses where we operate. So Number 1 London Bridge, which is just over the road from where we are now. They're very generous with their space. And yes, we have a dedicated team. We run as a small charity in our own right. So there's me, we have a treasurer, we have a fundraiser, all of those sorts of things you would expect for a charity.
So tell us a little bit about the national picture about adult literacy. There's quite a lot of stats that are put around, particularly in this year of reading, about children's literacy. But you are focused primarily on adult literacy, are you?
We do. Adults is our thing. That's what we offer. And I think actually this is the thing that really hooked me in. There are 2.4 million adults in England, that's just a stat for England, who either cannot read at all or who struggle to read. That's about 1 in 14 of the adult population. And I think it's something that's just not understood. Oh, certainly I would like to think of myself as being a relatively educated person who knows about the world and what's going on. And when I first found out, I had no idea. I think that's born out of the fact that we'd all be prepared to admit that we're a bit rubbish with numbers. You know, oh, maths isn't my thing. You know, I don't really like looking at my bank account. It runs itself. And you make a bit of a joke about it, and that's all socially okay. But I think for somebody to admit that they can't read, there's a great deal of stigma and embarrassment around that. And people can't read for a whole set of different reasons. But that 2.4 million people is just not known about, I don't think.
And it's something that's difficult to talk about.
People who come to us, they've already made a really big, brave decision. They've admitted they have a problem, and then they've done something about trying to sort that out. And yes, you know, the readers never cease to inspire me because they are amazing people, but for a variety of reasons, somehow they reach adulthood and they can't read.
And then life is very limited because you can't read the letters that arrive from the council, you can't read the road signs, you can't read stories to your children, and on we go. I mean, life becomes very different.
It's all of those things. I mean, so about 50% of our readers have jobs, and of the 50% who don't, about half of them are actively looking for employment. But obviously those stats are quite stark compared to national stats as a whole. And those people who are in work are more likely to be in low paid or insecure work. And obviously they are excluded from all the normal sort of training programs that employers would offer because they can't read. You've got the embarrassment situation, people who say, oh, I haven't brought my glasses, people who always order the first thing on the menu as a cover-up. And then there's the whole social isolation. People get lost, they can't read signs. How many pharmacists give out a prescription with the instructions on the bottle about when to take your medication, how many times a day, without actually checking whether that person can read that bottle? It's just things that you and I would take for granted that a lot of people struggle with.
As you say, we joke about numbers, but this is anything but a joke for people. This is something that they often try to hide out of embarrassment.
Well, a lot of our readers don't want us to talk about them because they do this and they want it to remain very private. But we do have some who are prepared to stick their head above the parapet, if you like, because they recognise that their stories will encourage others, hopefully, to seek help. And we've got this amazing guy called Ashley, who is one of our readers. He's been working with his coach, Sheila, and he described not being able to read as his dirty little secret. Now, he's one of the brave ones, but think about those words, dirty little secret. Number one, this shouldn't be a secret. Number two, it's not little. It's not little for the impact on our readers or their families or, in fact, society as a whole. And there's nothing dirty about this. People come to us for a variety of reasons. You might have undiagnosed dyslexia as a child, people who've come from the care system where their education has been disrupted, people who've been ill as a child, or, of course, in areas like Southwark and other city centres, we have a very diverse population. A lot of people don't have English as their first language. So none of those are reasons that people should feel embarrassed about, but they are real reasons why people need help.
And just to hone in a bit on Southwark, what particular challenges are you finding in this part of London?
English not being someone's first language is definitely a factor. So when we take a reader on, and we will have people referred to us from a number of agencies in Southwark, or self-referrals, or a family or a friend, they have to have a good spoken English, but a lot of them don't have reading English at all. And of course, you do have to make accommodations for that. And people have to be patient. Readers and coaches have to be patient when you have an added issue in the system. So that for us is a real thing. And I talk to my colleagues. So there are team leaders for Lambeth, there are team leaders for Croydon, there are team leaders in Bristol and Bath. And we have a forum, and it is a regular topic of conversation, English not being a first language.
You mentioned somebody's particular story there. I wondered if you could give us, one or two others about, and I know that they've given permission for you to do this.
So I went to a graduation earlier in the year, and we held the graduation at Walworth Road Library, and this amazing guy called Brian turned up. And Brian was a school caretaker all his life. So he did a job where he got by without being able to read. And he came to us when he was 69 or 70. So he wanted to just improve life. And he did the course and he graduated this year. He was 73 and he brought his family. Quite a character, but he was a great fan of Elvis. And so he can now read about Elvis. And then the other thing for him is that he can now practice karaoke. Which for him was a big thing. And I'm not quite certain what his wife would say about that. Another lady who recently graduated, she has an 11-year-old who just finished school for the summer and a 21-year-old who is at university. Our readers don't necessarily come from backgrounds where education isn't encouraged in their own families. They just can't read themselves. Yeah. But this lady who doesn't want to be named, but I can talk about her story, she is now going on to do a GCSE. So a lot of our readers then choose to use the initial skill they get with us to improve further. So yes, another story where I just look at these people and I go, you're amazing. But to look at them and hear them, you would not know that they have this issue with reading.
And a lot of people think it's something connected to either very bad early schooling or perhaps connected to prison, a lot of poor literacy in prisons, aren't there? That's where I first realised that the connection there was I was preaching at the Wandsworth prison, and I noticed how some of them were holding the service booklet upside down because they couldn't actually read it. And then I became very aware that actually not only couldn't they read the service order, but then they couldn't read the hymns. And I just realised just how much we take for granted in church, actually, about people being able to read.
Well, one of our readers very specifically came to us because she couldn't read the Bible.
Oh.
And she therefore felt excluded from her church community. And so her coach practices reading excerpts of the Bible with her, because what we do try and do with the training as people move through the course is make it more tailored to why they want to read. So because that brings things to life. So yes, a very real example. And yes, back to the prisons, we do work with the probation service because they are a source of readers for us.
So just tell us then how you are doing this. So you talk about the course. Just give us an idea as to, so somebody turns up, they've faced their fears and the problem that they're living with, and they want to do something about it, and they come and see you. Then what do you offer them?
So we work on this system called Turning Pages, but basically it's like a phonics-based system. So you take people back to A is for apple, B is for banana. Simple as that. Short words, recognising letters. You then move on to small sentences, more complicated words. And if I'm honest, by the time you get to Turning Pages 5, it's the sort of stuff that at school I would have found a bit tricky, because English isn't an easy language. Some of the grammar is quite technical. But the coach will take them through all of this. We have reading books. We have activities based in the local libraries so that we try and lighten it up. If you like, the Turning Pages is the nitty-gritty grammar, but there are other things which they read. And the critical thing is homework. Because, of course, when you're a child and you're learning to read, school is your life. That is your purpose. You go to school on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You're there for 4 or 5 hours a day. And learning is what you do, and you have this amazing human sponge as a brain. But our readers are people that, for one reason or another, that hasn't worked. So imagine the challenge that you then have an adult who you are giving 2 30-minute sessions a week. That's what we do. And that's the recommendation based on the fact that most of our readers have busy lives. And 30 minutes is actually quite a long time to be going through something which the reader is finding hard. So it's 2 30-minute sessions with homework in between. So that's technically how it works. We graduate people mostly at level 5. They get a certificate. We have a little ceremony. We celebrate the fact that they have reached this milestone. In that time, that person has generally built up quite a strong personal relationship with their coach. It's a big part of a lot of people's lives. And it's an odd one, because at that stage, our process is done. And we try to put people in touch with, if they want to continue their learning, with other agencies. If you like, that's the nuts and bolts of how it works.
You're teaching them to fly, and then you put them into other people's hands for a little bit more
Absolutely
acrobatic.
Yes, yes.
That's fantastic. And the coaches must be remarkable. They're volunteers, are they?
Everybody who works locally for Read Easy Southwark is a volunteer. The national charity has a very close-knit team of about 4 or 5 people. So it's a small group of people. So we run on very, very modest budgets because everyone's a volunteer. A lot of our coaches come from non-education backgrounds. They're very generalist. We train them to use the system. They get follow-up training during their journey with a reader, and they also get a mentor. So it can sometimes be quite isolated to just be with this one individual dealing with this intense learning experience twice a week for weeks on end. So we have a set of people called the coordinators. Not certain it's a dreadfully good name for them. I think mentors is better. And they dip in and out of those sessions to address any stumbling blocks and help people along the way. So anyone who is listening to this who wanted to be a coach, I suppose my message would be, we will help you. You don't have to be an expert. We will help you to be a good coach, as long as you are kind, patient, empathetic, and you are probably those things if you're listening and want to help. We have people who coach in the evenings. We have people who coach at weekends. We have some people who coach during the day. Quite a lot of our coaches are retired and have a bit more time to give back.
The frames must differ for people as from when they arrive to when they graduate. What's the average?
So at the moment, for us, people tend to be taking about 3 years. It's quite a long time.
It is, yeah.
But a lot of people come to us maybe with a few more challenges than we had expected. And actually, that was a bit of an eye-opener for us, because Read Easy Southwark's been going for 4 years, and I think we didn't expect things to take as long as they did. But obviously what matters is that you do it right, and that the reader does end up with the necessary skills. But not everyone takes that long. Another young lady, actually, who I wanted to talk about, and her name was Cora Ann. Very different set of circumstances, and she graduated with us, and it took her about 18 months. So a lot less. And I've got Cora Ann's own words, and I don't know whether it's okay to use, because it shows you the variety of people who come to us. So these are Cora Ann's words. I had a normal childhood, and I learned to read as a child. I took my GCSEs and was in my 3rd year of college, as well as working, when I had a stroke aged 18. I didn't expect the stroke to affect me as much as it did, and it took me over 10 years to regain my speech, my physical strength, and being able to understand what other people spoke to me. I lost all my friends, and my world shrank without them. Without my reading, I was bored and depressed, and I felt like nobody cared or was interested in me and my future. The Read Easy course was difficult at first, but in doing it every week, it became enjoyable. I was determined to finish it, and I feel my future is much brighter now. I now look at things with a purpose, and I'm reading again for fun and engaging with learning new things.
It's marvellous.
And Cora Ann was in that same graduation as Brian, who I spoke about earlier. Very different people, and she didn't want a lot of fuss about her graduation. But again, you just forget the variety of circumstances as to why people come to us. And I know some of my colleagues in other areas of London have used the Stroke Association as a source of readers.
The loneliness that can strike when you can't read. I mean, that's something that I was very aware of, because I'm a little bit passionate about this, because when I was at school, they ask you in 1 year whether you want to do this sort of cadet stuff, whether you wanted to do what they called social services. And I said I preferred to do that. And I went to the local arts centre in town every Thursday afternoon and helped a biker who'd had an accident which had affected his memory, and he had lost his ability to read. So he had been able to read, and he'd lost the ability. And I sat for a school year, so 3 terms, for an hour every week, taking him through basic reading. And the bond that you were talking about is something very strong. And I think I was only 17. And nobody could have been more different than him and me. We were poles apart in so many ways. He used to arrive in his bike leathers, but for that 1 hour, I was just trying to help him back into something he'd lost. And I still remember us having to say goodbye at the end of that year. It wells me up now, actually. He was so grateful. And I was so humbled, actually. I suddenly realised how vulnerable a life becomes without this basic skill which I'd taken for granted.
There were a lot of tears at a recent graduation I was at. Yes. People recognise that, they've come to the end of that stage, as you say, but the bond you build up is very strong.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So people listening to this who will be hugely admiring and excited about the work that you're doing, particularly for our locality, if they're thinking, well, what can I do? What would you say to them?
So I think the first thing to do is to look up Read Easy UK. Just a Google search. It's got a website. That website will give you the list of the 80 branches that we have around the UK. And if you go into those, there will be 2 contacts generally. There will be a contact if you want to be a volunteer, and there will be a contact if you think you know somebody who needs our help with reading. So that's the first port of call, because obviously we're here in Southwark Cathedral, but I hope people are listening from Lambeth and around other areas. So that's the key call out, really. And I would probably just reiterate that we as an organisation help volunteers to be effective in their role. I'm
so thrilled to meet you and to hear about your work. And you and I will continue to talk when this is finished, this podcast, as to how the cathedral might be able to help in the work of you and your colleagues. But just thank you so much for all that you and your colleagues are doing. It's such an important and, as you say, not always spoken of issue. And it's been great to talk to you today.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you to you. Thank you to the cathedral for making this happen. These sorts of opportunities for us are great in terms of getting the message across.
Thank you.